Malcolm Woolmore runs Lyndale Nurseries, New Zealand's largest propagation nursery. Malcolm began working at Lyndale when he was 13 years old and eventually became its owner.
Lyndale Nurseries is a specialised propagator of outdoor woody trees and shrubs predominantly. We do a few perennials, so that covers the whole gambit from New Zealand native plants right through from the pretty exotics that people have in their gardens in town. So we have specialised in that area of actually taking a plant and producing a lot more of it. So that might be from tissue culture, might be from cuttings, might be from seed. So that's basically our option. We grow about 3 million young plants a year. Once upon a time, we used to be able to think we grew one for every New Zealander, but we've dropped back a bit and New Zealand's grown a bit. So we sit around 3 million units into the New Zealand market. Our customers are a whole network of nurseries that have no profile in New Zealand. When people think of nurseries, they think of Mitre 10, Palmers, Kings, Oderings, that sort of garden group. We don't sell to any of those people. We sell to people that sell to them. So we've taken an area of the nursery industry, which is propagating plants, and we've specialised in that. The grade of plant that we sell is called a liner. So that's a young plant that is ready to move on to another stage and grow bigger. This nursery dates back to 1960, where it was a one-man band in New Lynn, hence its name, Lyndale. It was started by a lady called Nolan Parr, who the nursery industry was a very male-dominated industry in those days, and it still predominantly is, but much more so in those days. And Nolan was a very clever businesswoman and a very good nursery person. Carved a very successful business in a world that didn't really want to know about her as a nurseryman. And I stumbled across Nolan when my mum and dad said, go and get a job after school type thing to buy a new yacht sail. So I walked down the road and I think it was the second nursery I knocked on the door and Nolan said, yes, I've got a job for you. Our biggest challenge is what to grow, to predict where the public taste is going to end up. And that's my argument for reading ladies' fashion magazines. I spend a lot of time looking at colour trends, fashion design, architectural trends. That's got a huge bearing on what plants are going to be in demand in the future, because we have to look maybe as much as 4 or 5 years ahead to try and get our production systems up to spec to produce the numbers that we think are going to be required. So there's a lot of scope to get it horribly wrong. We're part of global trends very much, and it seems to be a trend that sweeps the world. Sometimes we're at the cutting edge of it, and sometimes we follow along blithely. And you never really know which one's going to be in front. What this is all about is deflasking plants from tissue culture. So plants can be propagated, we call them in vitro. So that means that a micro cutting or a little tiny cutting is taken and put onto agar. So agar is impregnated into these pots and little micro cuttings are set into them. It's quite a lengthy process and quite labour intensive. This is from a New Zealand laboratory. We specialise in taking those little babies, which are in a very protected environment, and turning them into something in the real world where they can turn into real plants as we know them. Every plant's got a unique story about propagating, and our job is to know that unique story and to figure out how to propagate it. And this particular one is all about taking a little cluster of buds, dividing them up with a scalpel, and putting them onto that agar, and hey presto, if you get everything else right, you grow a plant. One of the big pluses of a plant in tissue culture is that it's recognised around the world that it's in a sterile condition. So biosecurity regulations around the world are very relaxed about allowing this sort of product into their country, because they can see quite clearly that there's no form of contamination around it. What that means is that with no contamination, it can come into New Zealand from overseas, or in fact we can send it from New Zealand pretty well anywhere in the world. We still have certain protocols we have to meet, but it's much easier than live plants. Once you've actually got some roots on a plant, you've actually got a live plant, you've then got to do something with it. That's once you've determined that you've got a market to sell it to. Then you've got to take that plant with roots on it, and these days we put them into plugs. So what that means, it's a little unit, and very easy to transfer that unit into a bigger unit. In the interim, we're hand potting everything, Why that is because to produce our 3 million plants, we've got to grow 900 different varieties of plant in New Zealand for that market. If we were in the United States, we might grow 50 varieties, and we'd be really, really good at those 50 varieties. We have to adapt 800 different types of plant that each like something a bit different to basically the same environment. In this particular case, we're pan-potting native plants here, and we would expect to sell those in 6 to 8 months' time. Over on the other side, we've got cuttings. We've got cuttings being made, and that's just a fast as you can thing. Once again, it's a knowledge situation where every plant requires slightly different techniques. So it's adapting to that particular material of the plant, the state of its growth, and what that particular plant needs. So it might be a woody plant, like a hedge line, like a cypress, or it might be a soft thing like a petunia, for example. You're still making cuttings, but they need quite different expertise in how you handle it.
This program was made with funding from New Zealand On Air.